morning, everybody, whether you're watching on the East Coast, West Coast, or around the world. This is Football Talk. I'm your host, Bo, and this is our Hawk Talk segment brought to you by El Cajon down there in Pike Place Market. If you go in on Wednesday through Sunday, 4 to 9 p.m., mention the Hawk Talk segment and get 20% off your bill. So definitely go check out El Cajon. That is in Pike Place Market. And so let's get rolling. This is our last Hawk Talk before the draft hits, or at least the first round of the draft. So, looking forward to, what that's going to be. There's been a lot of speculation. Obviously, you have a lot of movement from the Seahawks in free agency, which is pretty rare for them. So they definitely look like they are interested in trying to win in the next year or two. And that can definitely affect that. That first round. Oh, that was weird. I'm not totally sure what happened there, but so I've kind of gone back and forth on whether or not they would take a quarterback or if they're going to go after a defensive lineman, just because at 5, either one is really a possibility. If Arizona stays where they're at, they pick up Will Anderson, I would imagine. If they trade out, then the top 4 quarterbacks are probably going to be gone. And then Will Anderson falls to 5, which, the Seahawks would definitely use. And that would add a real dynamic feature to that defensive line. So it definitely would change. I mean, it's already going to be a better defense than it was a year ago, just based on some of the things that they did in the free agency period already. But I think if Will Anderson did fall to 5, that's a slam dunk pick. And but if he's already off the board, there's speculation that Jalen Carter could slide a ways. So, do I think he makes it all the way down to 20? Probably not. But could the Hawks maybe move up from that second spot? Maybe. I don't see him doing it. There is quite a bit of defensive line talent in this draft. And so they probably wouldn't move up to go get him. But if he did happen to fall, they would probably pick him up at that spot. But, on the same token, if, Anthony Richardson does fall to 5, I could see them picking that up. He would be a great fit for that Seahawks offense. He'd get a learn behind Geno for at least a year. And, I feel like his game could definitely use that. His athletic upside, like I said before, is amazing. But he has, a little bit of accuracy and completion percentage issues. And so that makes him a little bit of a project. But with the way that the Seahawks develop talent and the fact that he wouldn't have to start immediately, I think would be really beneficial for both teams, both parties, right? He doesn't have to go out and try and be the guy day one, and the Hawks can bring him along and still have a good veteran in Geno who's smart with the ball, would be able to teach, mentor the kid, bring him along in a way that, like I made the comparison before, Josh Allen, when he entered the league, he did not have the best completion percentage ever. And that has evolved, over the past couple of years as he's been in the league. So I think that he could probably do something like that. Obviously, his build is a little bit more like a Cam Newton. So he'd probably be able to run a little bit, but hopefully they can get that passing and accuracy dialed in. That was one of the big things with Cam Newton, is that was a little bit of a weakness in his game. And as his athleticism started to fade, he didn't have that to transition back into. It's one of the things that I find interesting with the Lamar situation is he has really come along as a passer. He's not one of the most elite passers in the league. That's where the rest of his athleticism really comes in. but he is well above average as a passer at this point in his career. And so that really shows the growth that he's had over, the past, 4 or 5 seasons. And, I think that AR-15 could probably, learn that, especially because he doesn't have to come in and immediately be the guy if Seattle were to pick him up. But that being said, if for whatever reason who they want is gone and Seattle maybe trades back out of the 5th spot, and they drop back into maybe the 6th or the 7th, depending on who wants to try and make a move to pick up a potential quarterback or something, then of course they could probably pick up Jalen Carter in one of those spots. With that 20th pick, that's where it gets a little bit interesting, because that's a position that the Seahawks are used to being in and really tend to trade out of that. So I could actually see, especially if a guy like Jalen Carter or something is already off the board and they've used that 5th pick on a Will Anderson or a quarterback or whatever, that 20th spot, I could actually see them trading back into maybe the 25th, 27th, pick up an extra couple 3rd-round picks, being as, although they have 2 firsts, 2 seconds, they only have 1 third, and they really like to make moves in the 3rd and 4th, and they only have 1 in each one of those rounds. So I think if they traded back out of that 20th pick into, again, like 25, 27, I think they could pick up, a 3rd and a 4th, or, something probably, I don't know, probably like a 3rd and a 4th, or maybe like a 3rd and maybe a 3rd next year, something like that. So I could see them moving back from that position. But, if they did pick up a quarterback, if they did stay at 20, they could pick up a guy like an edge rusher, Nolan Smith out of Georgia, maybe Miles Murphy, something like that. Then you get round 2. Again, they got a couple of picks. The 37th pick for them is, one of the Denver picks. And I think they could probably take a look at a guy like Josh Downs at that spot. He's quick. He's a shorter guy, so he would probably be more like a slot receiver. Really probably a guy that would transition into moving into that Tyler Lockett role. And I only say that because Tyler Lockett, although extraordinarily effective, is starting to get older. And this is kind of where you start to plan for the future. Now, Lockett is incredibly good at getting the ball and getting down, which, obviously a business decision, but what it means is he doesn't fumble and he doesn't take huge hits. It's something that Doug Baldwin used to do a lot. He would catch it, and if there were guys close, he'd, hit the ground. And I mean, as a fan, you're always hoping that they can get some yak yardage, break a tackle, and, something can happen. But again, if you do that and you get the first down, you get down, you don't fumble, you're not, putting your body in unnecessary risk when you could take that big hit and potentially not get any extra yards. So I feel like a Josh Downs could start to move into that position, but he doesn't have to be great day one. Obviously, they have Lockett, they have DK. Goodwin looked awesome last year when he was filling in for either one of those guys when they were hurt. So they have some pieces that are already solid. So again, he can come in and do his job. Doesn't have to be anything, he doesn't have to come in and try and be a number one or anything like that. There's also, a guard that they could pick up there, and Osiris Torrance from, out of Florida. That could also be a good fit. There's some, both sides of the ball on the line. There's some things that need to get worked on. So the interior of the offensive line had a real problem getting holes opened up in the running game. And then, of course, on the defensive line, they just, they couldn't get any penetration most of the year. So, and couldn't stop a run either. So, it's one of those things that there's some interior line needs and defensive line and linebacker needs. So at the 37th pick, there's a few ways they could go. And then they have a second round pick at 52, which is what their original pick was. I could see them going after a cornerback like Julius Brents out of Kansas State, 6'3", 217 pounds, relatively quick, but a big-bodied corner, which Seattle really seems to like, and I feel like they could go after something like that. There's a center out of Wisconsin, Joe Tippmann, big dude, 6'6", 313 pounds, absolute monster. He was the 14th ranked center in college football, so that could also be a nice fit for him. There's also a linebacker, Drew Sanders. Again, another unit that could use some help. Obviously, in free agency, they brought Wagner back. They added a couple other linebackers, so it's not as glaring a need as it was throughout the season. But I could see them bringing in some younger talent into those units. Because Bobby Wagner, even though it's great to have him back, awesome leadership, super effective. I think he was still ranked the second best linebacker, from Pro Football Focus. But he is getting older. And so if you can pick up a high-level linebacker to come in, I could see something like that in the late, mid to late second round. And then, of course, third round, if they didn't go quarterback, you could probably pick up a guy like Hendon Hooker. At some point, you got to be planning for the future in the quarterback room. Geno, he's got a 3-year deal, which is team friendly. There's outs, after each year. Drew Lock only signed a 1-year deal. So if you could pick up a Hendon Hooker, who I think is only sliding this far because of his injury, talent-wise, I could have seen him going in, the first round had he stayed healthy. So if he does make it into the second round, or the third round, I could see a team like Seattle picking Hendon Hooker up. There's also a good tight end, Tucker Kraft out of South Dakota State. Bigger dude, 6'5", good hands. I didn't see a ton of tape on him, so I'm not sure how good he is as a blocker. If Seattle's picking up a tight end, he has to be a really good run blocker, just because it's the type of offense they like to run. So a lot of block and release type of things. So again, I didn't get to see a ton of tape on him, but based on size and build, I could see something like that coming through. And then there's, also some more linebackers that could be a good fit later in that round. Round 4, this is where the speculation is just all over the place, right? Because there's really no way to know what teams are picking by the time you get into the 4th round. So all of these mock drafts, I'm ready for mock drafts to basically be done, just because it's all speculation. Nobody really knows what's going to happen. You might accidentally get one right, but I mean, at the end of the day, I'm not even necessarily sure the teams, they have such a big board of things that they like that, who knows what they're going to do on draft day, especially by the time you get into the 4th and 5th rounds. But once you get down this far, there's lots of things that open up. Wide receiver out of Cincinnati, Tyler Scott, it's another shorter guy, another, Tyler Lockett type guy that they could, potentially bring in. 5th round, you got some, you got to line a couple of, you got some defensive guys that could be really good. So you got Noah Sewell out of Oregon. runs a 4.64 and at 246, 246 pounds. So really agile guy, adds a dynamic element to it just because of his speed. So that's a guy that I think could potentially, if you ended up with a Jamal Adams, who I understand is a safety, but they really kind of use him more as a linebacker. I could see a guy like this being able to come into that role a little bit, because unfortunately last year, as soon as that linebacking core lost that, that athletic element that Jamal Adams brings, being as he isn't a great coverage safety, but he does rush the quarterback well. He does, come down to the run well. And they just didn't have anybody that was that athletic to come into that position. So unfortunately, it hurt that unit last year, but I think a guy like this could potentially, fill that role if you ended up with an injury to Jamal Adams. And I only bring that up because he's been injured every year that he's been here in Seattle. So that's kind of my concern there. There's also a tight end in Zach Kuhns out of Old Dominion. And this dude is a monster. He is 6'7", runs a 4.55. And, somebody that's that big, they're going to win most of those 50-50 balls because they're still pretty quick. Now, that's relative speed to a linebacker, but at 6'7", they're going to have some range, arms-wise, that most of those linebackers are probably not going to have. And you're going to end up with that kind of Gronk-ish body. Again, this is another one where I didn't get to see a ton of tape, so I don't know how he is as a blocker. Again, as a tight end, if you're a Seahawk, you really need to be able to block, and then have, some good catching ability. But again, a lot of those are block and release type things. So, that'll definitely be something to watch for. There's also a safety out of Notre Dame, Brendan Joseph, who, runs a 4.62, pretty quick. Definitely, a compliment to Diggs back there. But, again, it's later in the rounds. So this is all, pure speculation, which is, again, why I was like, I'm ready for the draft to finally come and actually get some information. At the beginning of the show, I said it was the last one before the draft. And I only say that because there's a chance that we may miss next week. If not, then, obviously we will go on as scheduled. But yeah. So, all right. So if we move later in the rounds, let's go round 7. End of the draft. It's always kind of a, you're just throwing a dart at the board, kind of best athlete that's there. And I think that you could pick up another edge. DJ Johnson out of Oregon, runs a 4.49 as a big man. So that's pretty amazing. There's also going to be a wide receiver. And this one interests me a bit because he is a kid out of Arkansas, 6'4", and runs a 4.37. So this is something that would fit well with, if you go back a couple of episodes of Hawk Talk here, I was talking about the potential of them moving on from DK. Now, I understand that DK signed a deal, and there's a chance because, when you watch DK's game, absolute freak athlete, incredibly fast, can catch the hard passes, does drop some of the easier ones. And, like I've said in other shows, he does have that tendency to lose his head at some point during the game and get that 15-yard unsportsmanlike conduct penalty, which is an absolute drive killer. So if they needed to clear up some cap space and pick up some extra draft capital, I could see them moving DK for a guy like this, who again is 6'4", runs a 4.37. So he's not that much slower than DK. Super big guy, would be able to do similar things that DK does, but would be on his rookie deal. And so you'd be able to clear up some of that cap space. And of course, if they did trade DK, he would bring back at least a number 1 and a 3, potentially 2 number 1s, depending on the team. So I could see them doing something like that. And then, if he doesn't pan out, it was a 7th round pick. It's not that big of a deal. There's also a corner in Daryl Luter Jr. Out of South Alabama, 6-footer, runs a 4.46. So he's kind of a smaller corner. It's not generally what they go after, but I could see him coming in as like a nickel corner, something like that. I could see him coming in for sort of situational type things. Again, it's a 7th round pick, so if you guess wrong, it's not horrible. Lots of guys in the later rounds are, it's just a toss up on whether or not their game translates to the next level. But so that's kind of how I think, this could play out through the draft. I think the biggest thing is that number 5 pick. I do think they're going to take their number 5 pick. Now, whether or not it's going to be a quarterback or a defensive line / edge rusher, that's, that really depends on what is available at 5. I did get a couple of questions. One, are they going to try and re-sign Ford? I think they do try and do it. The problem is he's going to command or be able to command quite a bit of money. And the Seahawks really don't have that cap space anymore. So would they like to get a deal done? Of course. Would Ford probably like to stay a Seahawk? I would imagine so. But if he's trying for top dollar, the Seahawks just don't have it anymore. They are really close to that cap, and they still have their draft picks to bring in. It's also why a guy like Frank Clark hadn't gotten a phone call from him. It's just another guy that's an expensive guy. And at the end of the day, it just, there's just not enough money there. Unless they were going to start doing some real creative accounting that, like the Rams did. And the problem with that is you end up with the Rams situation. Now, it worked for the Rams. They were able to delay some of those contracts and, manipulate the cap in a way that they were able to go get a ring. But now you see them getting absolutely gutted, and they are not going to be a competitive team probably this year. So it works if you shove all the chips in and you understand that you're going to blow up your team. It's smart if it works, right? And it did for the Rams. They got the ring. But when you look at teams like the Saints, who did something similar where they, threw a lot of money at it and they just weren't a good team. And now they're trying to fix things and, they didn't win a ring, right? So it's smart if you win and it's dumb if you don't. And in a division where the Niners are probably still on paper the better team, outside of quarterback, the rest of their roster is absolutely stacked. So, the Achilles heel for that Niners team is the fact that they just can't seem to keep a quarterback healthy and on the field. Because if they would have had just competent quarterback play through the playoffs, they probably could have gone all the way and won. The fact that they had Christian McCaffrey back there to throw some passes, you're not going to win many games that way. Not that he couldn't throw the ball, but if you're guys are just blowing through the line and murdering your quarterback all the time, it's tough to win games regardless of the amount of talent that's around them. So the hole that Niners team has obviously has to be the offensive line, because those quarterbacks just keep getting hammered. But that's probably still, again, the better team in the division. So I don't really see them shoving all the chips in and, destroying future cap space in the hopes of winning a ring this year. I don't see them doing anything like that. I could see them doing it with a contract or something like that, where it doesn't completely bury the team later. But I don't see them doing what the Rams did, where they just did it for every all-star they could possibly bring in. Now, again, it was effective. They won a ring. I can't hate on them for that. I mean, at the end of the day, everyone plays this game to get that ring, get the Lombardi. So good on them. But I don't see the Seahawks doing something like that, especially with, it coming down to the last couple years of Pete and John's contracts. I don't see them doing especially if they don't win, I don't see them doing a legacy burning type thing. And then it would also be hard to bring in top level coaching if they do happen to retire at the end of this contract. It'd be tough to bring in top level coaching to a team that is stripped of talent and in financial trouble. So I don't really see them doing anything kind of irresponsible from the outside in that way. So that's kind of the way I look at that. But yeah, so we're just about at this new season. We're gonna start having an idea of what exactly the team is kind of gonna look like. Looking forward to this draft being done so that we know the free agents that are in, the draft picks are in, and we can really start to figure out where this team is headed and the pieces that are, still needed. I think regardless of how the draft goes, there's probably still going to be a little bit of questions on the defensive line. Now, if they pick up a Will Anderson or a Jalen Carter, that'll obviously answer some of those questions, but they are rookies. And even though their talent looks like it should translate, that's not always the case. So, that'll definitely be a wait and see situation. But if they can address that interior offensive line, the D line, and linebacker, this team is definitely built in a way that they could win, double digits. Also looking forward to the beginning of May is when your actual schedule is released. Now, we know who we're playing, but we don't know when they're playing. And that can make such a huge difference on a year. If you're going against a team that has a bunch of rookies and you meet them early, the odds of you being able to beat them is high. Or if you're playing against an older team, it's later in the season, older players tend to get banged up. That can be the difference between a close game or a loss and into a win. So it'll be good to see when you're going to play these guys, and then there's going to be tougher games on the schedule. I mean, like there always is, but they do play the Eagles this year. Looking forward to that matchup, because that defense, if they can get a guy like a Carter or an Anderson, and you have Wagner back, plus a couple of the defensive linemen they brought in over free agency, similarly with linebacking core, they add a couple pieces to that. You can see a jump from a Hawks defense that was somewhere, depending on which ranking you were looking at, they were basically a 28 to 30 ranked defense, which in either way is terrible. And even if they were to roll out today, I think they would take a big step forward to mostly the middle of the pack, bringing, again, some of that defensive line help and, linebacking help in. Also getting Jamal Adams back. So I think you could see kind of a between 15 and 20 ranked defense. And then if they make some smart moves on defense during the draft, I could see them being somewhere between 10 and 15. I still don't think they would be a top 10 defense just because of how bad those units were last year, but definitely making strides in the right direction. And with as many points as that offense was putting up this last season, if they just had a middle of the road defense, that goes from a 9-win team to probably a 12-win team. So I definitely think this will be a big step forward. This year, their schedule is going to be a little bit tougher. They're not going to play the South, which was horrible and somehow was 4 of their losses, but they're going to play teams like the Eagles and stuff that were, playoff teams. So this weird. I do think so. I think they end up being a 10-7 team. So we'll kind of see how that goes. But yeah, other than that, be sure to like, subscribe. If you're watching on my channel, check out some of our other shows. If you're watching on Hardcore Sports or Let's Talk Sports, be sure to check out some of the other content. There's plenty of good shows to watch. Other than that, be sure to check me out on Twitter. I chat with people all the time. And also send in your questions each week, whether they're questions, theories, whatever you want my take on. Send it in. I like addressing those during the show. It's a lot of fun. And of course, because this show is live, always open to jump in the comment section, and I try and answer stuff live during the show as well. So lots of ways to watch. Other than that, you guys enjoy your weekend. I'm going to be joining the Bodkins show with my guy Nick, and that'll be Sunday night. So be sure to tune in on Let's Talk Sports. Always fun talking with Nick, so looking forward to that. Other than that, you guys enjoy the rest of your weekend.